All good. Recording in progress. There you go. So yes, good evening everybody and welcome to the Spirit Thief virtual tasting event and product launch for the Benrinnes that we have been talking about, and here we all are. So we hope that wherever we find you tonight that you are doing well, that the sun is still up for us, and that you're looking forward to a fantastic night with some great fantastic whiskies going on. We have got myself and Craig here from the Whisky Company, and we also have Brett and Kristen here from Spirit Thief, and we are very much looking forward to finding out a bit more about them, and of course trying some of these fantastic whiskies. So I can see a lot of you are here with the videos on, and we appreciate that. It's always nice to see some friendly faces out there. But if you could, please use the chat for any questions or comments throughout the presentation. We would encourage you to get involved in that way. Then at the end, we will open it up and have a bit of a chat at the end with the time that we've got. So please feel free to get involved, ask questions. We love questions. There's no such thing as a bad one, and we will get them through. But yeah, please, if you can, refrain from using your mics unless we call you in, and that should be very good and well. So I am now going to hand you over to Brett over at Spirit Thief, or down for us at Spirit Thief as it may be. How you doing, mate?
I'm great. Thanks, thanks, guys. It's fantastic to be able to, come and do another one of these events. I can't really, well, I can leave the state, but I may not be able to get back in. Is kind of the issue at the moment. So it's good to be able to join everyone online and see a few familiar faces here tonight. I'm just scrolling through and having a look at the grid view, and yeah, nice to see a few people from the industry I haven't been able to catch up with for a while. Hello, Laura. I can see you sitting there waving along. So yeah, I'm really excited to be able to present 5 whiskies to everyone here this evening.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And speaking of which, just for you guys at home with your tasting mats and everything so we can get ready, Brett, would you like to run us through the order that we are going to taste these whiskies in so everyone can get their night in order?
Absolutely. Thanks, Anton. So, guys, we're going to start off. Whiskey number 1 is going to be our New Zealand Whisky Co. French Oak Pinot Noir and American Oak Bourbon. So that's going to be whiskey number 1. Number 2, we're going to do our Benrinnes Bordeaux cask. So there are our 2 independent bottlings and what we call our part of our exploration series. So that'll be the first 2. And then I might take you guys for a little bit of a walk through the distillery after this, after we've done those first 2, show you around where we actually make our spirit on site now for what we call our Cellar Reserve Series, or our core release. So the 3 whiskies following that will be our American Oak Shiraz, followed by our French Oak Tempranillo, and then last but certainly not least is our limited edition American Oak Tempranillo. So we'll be jumping around a little bit, lots of diversity happening, but the synergy and where Spirit Thief really, lays its claim is with toasted and charred ex-red wine casks with these different varieties. So yeah, I'm excited to go on this journey tonight.
Fantastic. I think we're all excited to go on this journey. So starting with the French Oak Pinot Noir New Zealand whiskey collection. So what are we going to expect from this one?
Well, this is one of the first collaborations that we kind of got to do in an independent bottling plant. So the spirit itself was bottled at 48.1% ABV. So it's the lower end of our spectrum. In fact, it's the lightest whiskey we've put out, if you like. We haven't put out one less than 48%. It's a 5-year-old, but at the time when we got to, do this collaboration, if you like, it's spirit from a little New Zealand distillery that isn't actually operational anymore. It's called Whisky Works up in Christchurch. We got to do some great stuff in Pinot Noir casks, and the New Zealand Whisky Collection. Some of you may be familiar with New Zealand Whisky Co. They sort of started out as an independent bottler themselves with Willowbank, and then had a similar trajectory. They're now have a brand new distillery operating out of the Spates Brewery over in New Zealand. So they've got big plans ahead. And when we got to work with these guys, this was almost some of their early pilot cask bottlings as well. So it started out in large American oak bourbon casks in sort of 120 litre ones. And then we worked with a New Zealand winery to source Pinot Noir. They were then flown back to Australia because the coopering didn't really exist 5 years ago over in New Zealand. The machining needing to be able to create the smaller casks for toasting and charring and recoopering. So what I can tell you is that it's about 83% on the Pinot Noir side, and we used about 17. The remainder of it was the American oak bourbon maturation. So they came to Tasmania separately. I trialed about 17 different barrels as part of this collection. We ended up choosing 8 of those. I think 7 with a Pinot Noir and 1 was the bourbon. Put that marriage together here in Hobart, just on the other side of this wall here behind me. And this sort of became an early independent bottling for us. So on that note, if you've poured this one out, it's a 5-year-old, it's a New Zealand spirit, but it's a Tasmanian independent bottling of that. And we're really happy. This was, I think, 360 bottles in the end. So please enjoy this little tasting. And what we might do, Anton, when you're ready, is throw me over for hosting, and I can run through a little bit of a presentation for everyone here tonight as well.
Sure, we'll just get that sent across to you.
Oh, thanks, Kristen. Yeah, starting with the New Zealand one, Huey. If anyone missed it, Kristen has joined us recently. She's based in Macedon as our national sales and marketing manager. So, any questions, throw them over. If I can't answer them, Kristen will, and Anton and Craig are going to help me out with that chat as we go as well.
Yeah, between us, I'm sure we'll get it covered. I believe you've got the host is all transferred. Yeah. Yep. You should be good to go there, mate.
All right. Excellent. Bear with me, guys, whilst I just try and do a share screen. See if I can bring this up. Cool. And then see if we can. How's that? Can everyone see that?
I certainly can. Give us a thumbs up if you can see that out there.
Everyone's on mute, so
yeah, no, thumbs up all around across the board. So I think you're good to go there, mate.
Thumbs up is excellent, fantastic. Well, I wanted to give you guys a little bit of background on Spirit Thief as we're enjoying this New Zealand. So we are based here in Tasmania, about 20 minutes south of Hobart, in a little place called Huntingfield. Spirit Thief kicked off life as an independent bottler in 2015. So we have been going for about 6 years. My original background is from just outside McLaren Vale in South Australia. So I grew up around those heavier reds and the wine industry. My grandfather worked for Hardy's Winery for about 40 odd years. I've got a photo in the presentation to sort of share with you a little bit later on that. So for me, Shiraz, the heavy reds, the Cabernets and Merlots, that's what I grew up with. And so when I eventually kind of, moved over to London and got introduced to Scottish single malt whiskies, I remember it was the 10-year-old Ardbeg that really was the turning point for me in my early 20s. And I'd never had anything like that. And so that sort of stayed with me. And when I came back to Australia and got a chance to move down to Tasmania 10 years ago now, I really got involved with the whiskey side of things as much as with wine. And so I guess my natural gravitation when it got into whiskey was the idea of being able to produce Tasmanian single malt, and how would that go with Australian heavier red wine casks. So Longrow Red was an early influencer on us. We loved what we were doing. It was myself and 2 other guys in the Tasmanian whiskey industry that started this company in 2015. Ian Reid and Jared Brown. So they were both having time worked at Lark and Sullivan's Cove. Anyone that visits Hobart now may know the Gold Bar. Ian's the owner of the Gold Bar, and Jared is sort of the national brand manager now for Hobart Brewing Company. So we've all kind of ventured on to do some great things around it. But when we got underway, this was our first release. So in 2015, we were really just running pilot casks with a distillery called Redlands Distillery, which was out in Plenty. Dean Jackson was the head distiller there, who trained under Bill Lark. And Dean ended up going to work for Spring Bay. So I'm sure there's some Spring Bay fans out there tonight. So he's now there at Spring Bay. But in the early days, we got a chance to work with Dean to make a spirit and mature in two styles of cask. It was American Oak Shiraz and French Oak Tempranillo. And later on, we're going to get a chance to try those along the way there as well. But we had zero marketing budget, really. So you can see we kind of had to go to market with a pretty cheaper budget at the time. And this is just showing you guys what we got to do with the bottling. For anyone that doesn't know, this is actually a Spirit Thief, if you can see in my sort of window here. And this is what we used to draw out the spirit from the cask itself. And that became the logo in the center there. And we had a bit of a play on words. So using the sense of thief, the actual imagery on the bottles were original convict kind of prisoners here in Tasmania. So we got a chance to use some of those original criminal records on the bottles themselves. And that was kind of where the brand kicked off. After we released those, it was only about 110 bottles of each of the Tempranillo and Shiraz, but it was received pretty well in bars around the country, and some of the bartenders, and they were keen to find out, when the next release was coming out. But of course, they were just pilot casks for us. So we had to then lay down some more as we went. And that's what we, of course, did in Tempranillo and Shiraz, Cabernet and Grenache, and a few other exciting projects. But in the meantime, we continued on as an independent bottler. And so that first experiment gave us, I guess, a lot of confidence to go on to then really look at, what we could do going forward. So this is just a little video that we put together a few months ago for the release of these three whiskies, which we're going to be tasting later tonight. And so you can kind of see after those pilot casks, we got to do some fun stuff with a proprietary bottle and launch. But that's sort of part two there. What we're looking at tonight is our exploration series. So the New Zealand was actually the first whiskey that we released, and this was in September last year, I think, just over 12 months ago. So I hope you guys are enjoying this one. It's got that rich, lovely sort of sugar and spice and cherry kind of tarts, I think, on this there as well. At 48%, it's got a nice mouthfeel and really carries through a little bit of depth. Yeah. If anyone's got some comments or thoughts on the New Zealand, please let me know as we go in the comments and things along the way. So our exploration series was a chance to, I'll just admit someone into the session there now that I'm on hosting duties.
Multitasking.
Yeah. No, it's all good. It was a chance for us to work with a number of distilleries around Tasmania and also expand internationally. So this exploration series here, the New Zealand, which we're trying, is our French Oak Pinot Noir and American Oak Bourbon, pulling those two together. We got to work with Belgrove, Peter Bignell, who's a good friend of ours. We got to go in and use his distilling equipment to kind of make a peated Cabernet Sauvignon style whiskey, which is pretty mad. If anyone out there has had a chance to try it, it was Tasmanian peat from the northwest coast. But what we actually got to do was smoke that grain after we'd been gristed. So the level of smoke on it was quite significant. And then it spent some time in Domain A. Winery Cabernet Sauvignon cask, which was great. Sheen Distillery or Sheen Estate, we did a French oak Grenache. We actually got to do the first double distilled spirit there on site with Sheen, who at that time were making Mackey's triple distilled whiskey. If you've had a chance to try Mackey's, really rich port infused flavor. Of course, the big news this week is the Lark company just bought the Sheen Distillery estate and assets for $40 million on Monday. So things move quickly here in Tasmania in terms of whiskey acquisitions.
Not mucking around, are they?
No. So that was a big play. The next one is the Benrinnes, which we're probably going to move to in just a minute. And then we got to do a couple of cask strength releases, one with Adams, where we really went a heavy char and toast for American Oak Shiraz. And then we did a French Oak Mataro, again with Belgrove. So that just shows you, what we've been working on for the last really 6 years, whilst the company's been evolving and started out as an independent bottler. If I'd, had the luxury, I guess, of mapping out how this was going to play, we would have just started out as with our own whiskey from the get-go. But life doesn't always play out that way. We started as an independent bottler, doing those, pilot casks received really well. That led to some investment, and now we get to make a reasonable scale production on this equipment here behind me, which I'll show you guys shortly there too.
Can I just jump in at this point, sorry, Brett, and just say to anyone out there who's obviously trying and nosing, tasting, let us know in the chat what you get from it. What are you getting? How are you finding it? Obviously, we've had a couple of people already indicate that they're enjoying it. Dalen's already said that it's a ripper drink, and well done. Can't disagree with that. Craig's got some really creamy nose and berries. So if you detect anything, tell us in the chat what you're getting from it. Write your own tasting notes as you go, and it's interesting to see what other people are getting from it on a night like this. So please get involved in that way as well. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, for sure. For us, this was an exciting project. What we call the exploration series was really us doing our R&D. Where do we want to go with our own products down the line, and how does this sort of all fit together? A small amount of a separate, bourbon maturation that really gives it some length and tail and vanilla creaminess that's coming through, a little bit of butteriness, but there's rich fruit decadence there too. And the color of this whiskey is actually quite dark compared to some of the others at 48%. If this was at cask strength, it would be darker again. So yeah, for this one, they were maturing casks we were able to work with. Some of the others, we actually went in and made the spirit from scratch. So the exploration series was, all based around this as an independent bottler.
Oh, fantastic. I think that's a fantastic start as well. I see a couple of comments coming through, and Cherry Ripe that I think hits the money for me.
Yeah.
So a couple of people saying about maybe adding a drop of water, creamy flavor, opens it up a bit. So again, let us know if you're trying with water, without, what you're doing, and what a great way to start.
Great. I can't see the comments at the moment whilst I'm doing the presentation. So
no, that's all right. We'll pass them forward to you, and you guys just keep on rolling. And
good stuff. Yeah. And we're all for criticism here as well, because I totally acknowledge that we are a new company. We're not afraid of experimenting, and sometimes we're not always going to get it right. The Belgrove Cabernet peated is a prime example. Some people knows that and won't even put it to their lips, and others it's their favorite of the whole mix. So did you get a chance at any point earlier on, Anton, to try that Cabernet peated?
No, I have not, but I'm like you. I'm a member of the Ardbeg 10 Got Me Club, and it's don't think I've had a house that hasn't had a bottle on the shelf at all times since then. And So anything in that region sounds interesting to me, but I can understand how things like peated whiskey and certain other, things are, not everyone's taste, but that's what makes us all different. That's why certain people will prefer, big sherry bombs, and some people like lighter things. And it's the world of whiskey, isn't it? Everything is different. So we'll see how we go.
For sure. Well, if we're ready, we'll move on to whiskey number 2.
I think so. So that's the Benrinnes, the Bordeaux, yeah?
It is, yep. So it's the Benrinnes Bordeaux cask, Speyside single malt, single cask Scotch whiskey. 55.2%. If you've got some water, you might want to have a little palate cleanser between having the New Zealand and moving on to this one. All right. So the image that I've got on the screen here in front of us is the Château Gruaud-Larose over in Bordeaux. So it's part of the, I'll just check on the label here to get this right, the Saint-Julien appellation of the Bordeaux region of France. And we were really excited when we came across this, because once we'd done the New Zealand, I got a bit more confident about going out and searching internationally. We still had a little bit of time, obviously, waiting for our own whiskies to mature. But this is the first, acquisition that we did with the new investors on board, and it allowed us to go and talk to some brokers overseas. And I can tell you, what I knew as our foundations for Spirit Thief is that I wanted to find a full maturation red wine cask where we could get as much appellation and knowledge about the, what had gone on in that as possible. And so we got a number of samples sent through, including one from Coila over on Isla that was, I think, a 7 or 8 year old at the time. And what we discovered through that process when it arrived, I was very excited. Okay, great, Coila, full maturation, a red wine cask. And it literally was a pink whiskey. And so what we were able to determine from that is that the spirit had been poured in on top of a wet feel wine cask. And red wine casks, particularly internationally, for single malt whiskies, don't have the best reputation. Sometimes people think they're a bit tannic or they're a bit too winey. And the reason can be that they haven't necessarily been treated correctly before they've been filled with new make spirit. So that might mean that they've still got wine in them, or they haven't been, toasted and charred and retreated. So they can be great for finishing casks, but they can also be tricky with working for full maturations. So when I found this one, we were very excited to jump on board. We basically purchased it as a 7-year-old, and it's now 11 years of age that's gone through. But to tell you guys a little bit more about it, that winery there is highly regarded winery over in Bordeaux. Some of their wines sell for $1,100 Australian per bottle. And it's regarded, I think, as I think their motto itself is the king of wines and the wine of kings. So that's how they kind of position it.
They're not being modest about it, are they?
No, but they do have, a reasonable longevity and history with royalty in that particular vineyard. And it looks like a beautiful chateau, so I'd love to go and visit it.
So can I just ask at that point, seeing we're talking about such a great cask and whatnot, how was it treated, prior to being filled?
Yeah, so they don't have the exact records on that when we purchased it through the broker. So this cask, when we got the lead on it, found the sample, we're really, satisfied for it. We know it was a single cask that was filled from the outset as the Bordeaux red wine cask number, whatever that is, 1700253. And it was actually up in Colburn, in the Bond store up in Colburn there. So the records weren't as, how should we say it, as adept as we would have liked. But it did lead us to understand a lot more on R&D, and what we were doing by toasting and charring was leading to these these flavor profile differences compared to some of those other samples that came through at the time.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's have a little nose and taste of this. So this is at natural cask strength. Okay, so 11 years of age. This was actually supposed to be the first of our whiskies when we launched in September last year. I really wanted to launch with this because it was kind of the crown or the jewel in the crown of that exploration series. But due to COVID, bottling challenges, sending bottles over to Scotland, if we wanted to use the name Benrinnes, we had to bottle by the Scotch Whisky Association laws in Scotland, working with a proprietary bottle, getting it over during COVID. It was certainly a challenge, and getting it back was even more difficult. We had to air freight it in only a couple of months ago. But I hope you guys agree that, you know, this has been worthwhile when we get to nose and taste it, because I think this is a really lovely representation of a distillery that doesn't really have too many official bottlings either. So for an independent bottler to be able to land a Benrinnes, we're really excited about this. And I actually had the pleasure of doing a vertical tasting with 5 other Benrinnes bottlings in Launceston, this included in it, only a week or so ago. So we got to do some work with Scotch Malt Whisky Society and the guys from Atom Brands that had done some bottlings there as well. But this was the only full maturation as a red wine cask. So please enjoy nosing and tasting this one. I know I'm giving a lot of information about it. And I'll get to tasting notes in a minute, but I'd like, you know, you guys to have a chance to do it before I interject with what we think the tasting notes are.
Yeah, the reason I brought up the how the barrel's treated before is a couple of people were commenting there's a bit of smokiness there and questioning whether the barrel had been recharred or what had been going on. And a couple of people, Travis is saying there's a super thick mouthfeel and a really long on the palate. Here's another comment coming through. So that seems to be sort of inconsistent, and I see a lot of people sort of looking like they're enjoying it out there in that gallery view. So
yeah, cool. Okay, so you know, for those that are familiar with Speyside, there's usually a lot of bourbon casks and even refill bourbon casks through Speyside, and you get those honey, sweeter kind of vanilla notes. What I really like about this is it is a different take on Speyside. This spirit was actually done in 2007, and it was the year after Benrinnes had finished doing partial triple distilled. So for 33 years prior to that, in the lead up, if you've had older Benrinnes, they will have all been nearly partially triple distilled. And the following year, from 2007 onwards, they actually moved to double distillation. And so that was really one of the nice things about that vertical tasting. We got to see some older Benrinnes versus this one, and the character of the spirit shined through in all of them, because it is actually quite a meaty, viscous, almost briny, but not peated kind of spirit character that I really enjoy here, combining with these red wine casks, kind of fruit forward driven flavors. So you get that candy. I always sort of talk about this as baked peaches, a little bit that's coming through on the fruit side. And our tasting panel, you know, brings up umami around this. So that saltiness that's actually in the character of the spirit, that I hope has found a nice balance between char and fruit, and spirit shine through as well.
So we're getting a couple of other comments coming through. Laura said it's got almost licorice on the palate, and Jenna said that they're getting apple on the nose, bit of a honey taste, a bit of like a hot toddy.
Yep.
And that and Craig said also that the combination of the sweetness from the rum and the chocolate notes can also sway to that smoky effect as well.
Yeah, cool. If there's anyone that's, you know, interested in the nerd aspects of distilling, well, we actually found out when we make our spirit here, our new make spirit, the Heart Cup, the average overall will be 71% ABV. But with these Benrinnes, since they've moved to double distillation, they're more now at an average ABV on that heart spirit of sort of 67, 68%. So 3 to 4% lower on average in terms of that ABV, which means they run the cuts down a lot lower. And in those lower end notes is where you find those almost fainty aspects, which can give mouthfeel and character flavor. So if there was peat in this, that's where the peat would be coming through right at the end of that heart run. So by understanding where that average ABV is on the new make spirit, it allows us to understand a little bit more about how this spirit profile was put together. For a distillery that is quite often used, in blends, it's not often that you find it as a official bottling apart from a 12-year-old flora and fauna release, and I think they did a 21-year-old a couple of years ago as well.
Very good.
Cool.
So I think Kristen's just said that Terence out there is apparently right on the money with what a tasting panel has said recently. He said it's oh, hang on, the screen has just changed and I've lost it completely. Very different flavor, not sweet, not bitter. Tastes like burnt raisin toast in a pleasant way, like burnt raisins.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely adequate. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I can see the comments now. So yeah, tasting panel. We actually put this to our tasting panel 12 months ago. A tasting panel is actually based in Melbourne, where a couple of the board members are. Julian and Brooke from Whisky and Ailment. Any people here from Melbourne tonight might know them. They are a part of the tasting panel together with Alex Moores, who's on Scotch Malt Whisky Society. We got them all to taste this Benrinnes maybe 12 months ago when we put the panel together and we were getting ready to bottle it. And then we did it again last night now that it's out. And it was a really fun thing to sort of go back and sort of look at compared to our products now that we're coming out with that there as well. So it was good. So they're the two independent bottlings that we've been able to share with you guys tonight. The other 4 independent bottlings that we did are fully sold out, but these 2 are available at the end of tonight through the Whisky Company guys. So it's been a real pleasure to share those with you. I thought now anyone needs to take a break, whatever can do. I thought I might go for a little bit of a walk and just show you guys the distillery that I now brew and distill in. If we've got a couple of minutes to do that, Anton.
I think we have definitely got a couple of minutes to do that. I think we'd all be interested to have a look. So please, whenever you're ready, take us on a tour.
All right. It's just me here, so I'm going to see how this goes. Hopefully it doesn't jump around too much. And I'm going to try and stand in the way of the stills themselves. So these are the stills behind us. I'm actually in a distillery here called White Label Distillery. That's where I come in and brew and distill. It's been around now for about 3.5 years. For those that know Casey Overeem from Overeem and Jane and I go back a fair way in the sense that we were the first 2 curators of Tasmanian Whisky Week in about 2015. And Casey had this idea back then that he wanted to make a R&D distillery where people could come in, make their own new make, do a lot of work around that. And that sort of grew into the place where brewing and things could take place as well. So Overeem whiskey is kind of made on site here. All the brewing is done here now as well. And just on the other side of the wall over there is the new Overeem distillery, which of course was owned by Lark, but the guys got a chance to buy that back just last year. So behind me here, we've got, well, there's the forklift. I'm going to have to get used to kind of doing this. But the brewing equipment, we got the mash tuns over here and fermenters behind me. We can mash about 1,200 kilos of grain at any one time. And they're usually two mash tuns that go in. This is where we mash, and you can see the grain filter beds in place. The first mash tun we had was actually the ex-Archie Rose mash tun. After those guys upgraded we inherited their mash tun, and it was an absolute pain in the ass. So we've been able to improve on equipment since there. But you can see all the fermenters around us here along the way. And so after we ferment for 7 days, Spirit Thief had a chance to do some R&D when I first started here 3 years ago. And it was only myself and Anthony White, who was with Nant for a little while in Belgrove. And he's the master distiller here now, or the head distiller, if you like. And so we were really the first ones to get in and use the equipment. And when I started out, we only had 2 stills in place, which is this one just here behind me. I'm going to see if I can get a little bit of a better view for you guys there. This is the spirit still, 800 litre copper pot spirit still, Tasmanian Napalua. So all of Bill Lark's stills are Napalua in nature. And the one behind us here is the 1800 litre wash still. So the beer goes into the 1800 litre wash still on one day. It then comes out. We get about 250 litres of low wines. Those low wines then go into the spirit still here, together with the fours and feints of the previous run. And by the time we're ready for doing our heart cuts, it comes out the other side. Here we go. Can't quite see the vessels, but the vessels here behind me, we'll get about 120 litres of new make spirit out of a full batch run. So we start with 1,200 litres over there in the wash tun. And then by the time we finish, the amount of spirit that comes through is only 120 litres. So you're only getting about a 10% ratio of what you actually start out with the beer. But we go in around about 7.5%, let's call it 7% beer. And then at the end, we've got a 70% or 71% new make spirit. So 90% of the product that's created as part of spirit production, or whiskey production at least, gets caught up in the waste product. And what we're doing is condensing all the alcohol, so leaving behind the water, taking through the congeners and the flavor profiles to create a spirit. So yeah, that's a quick overview of what happens here on site. We make about 1,000 litres a month here at the moment of new make spirit. And that's just for Spirit Thief. So there's a bunch of other operations that take place for vodka and gin and some contract distilling here as well. So there's now since been added in a 3,400 litre wash still and an 800 litre spirit still as well. So there's now 4 stills on site, plus a little 50 litre R&D still over there in the corner there as well, which we do all of the work here on in terms of testing recipes and things like that along the way. One of the nice things is that Spirit Thief's future batches will actually include a brewing yeast as well as an M1 distiller's yeast. So we've opted for an Abbey Ale yeast, and they'll start to come out in our production next year, and we're really excited to see how that's changing up there as well. Love the little R&D still. Yeah, it's just a little 50 litre still there, Aaron. If you need a guinea pig, sure, we'll keep it in place. But that was made by Napalua as well. So it's the same kind of dimension, so that, you know, as much as we trial things out on R&D, we want to know that it's going to then reconnect and make sense again on the larger stills.
Certainly looks busy building with all that going on there.
Yeah, there's a lot going on. As I said, we've got, Overeem just next door, and Spirit Thief is out the back here. So yeah, it's a busy little enterprise for sure. Tim Duckett from Heartwood is only about 100 meters up the road. So any Heartwood and TIB fans, we're all on the same street.
Excellent. Well, thank you for showing us all of that. Taking us on a little tour and navigating forklifts and everything else in your travels. You did very well. So that takes us on to the next 3 whiskies. And so tell us about these next 3 coming up.
Yeah, cool. All right. So the next part of the journey for us, let me see if I can move on to the next slide. Yeah, there we go. really is the whiskies that I've had a hand in making myself. The other ones we call our independent series. We worked at other distilleries, but these ones I've been able to mash and brew and distill and mature in the way that we really saw the future of the company going. So this here is a little picture of Hardy's Winery, I guess where my background started out. My grandfather worked here for about 40 odd years and retired in 1981. And that's down in Adelaide and sort of shows the old horse and cart and barrels down there for Thomas Hardy and Sons wines. But these days, there's a bottle of the American Oak Shiraz. We got a chance to work with a small little winemaker up in the Adelaide Hills from Main and Cherry. So Michael Sexton's award-winning winemaker there. We knew that we could go and get provenance from his winery across the Tempranillo and Shiraz. And so those pilot casks that we did in 2015 were also Main and Cherry. And this meant that we could go back, get the same ones in place. So the three that you guys are going to try tonight have all been from the Main and Cherry winery. And they were then recut as 200 litre or 300 litre large wine barrels. They were then shaved, toasted and charred and cut to size down to 25 litre casks, which we've been able to mature for about 2 years and 8 months as a whole. We don't actually do single casks as part of our release. So you're going to be looking at about 15 to 20 of those that have been brought together, but each of the same SKU, the same style. So it's all American Oak Shiraz as one batch. So that's what we're going to kick off with, is what we call our Cellar Reserve Series. And this one here is our American Oak Shiraz. Everyone's had a chance to pour that. 48.3% alcohol is where we've sort of landed with our Cellar Reserve Series. A lot of distilleries will bring out a core release, at 43% or early 40s. They tend to mature, of course, in bourbon or ports or sherries, and those fortifieds can carry a bit more. It was a really deliberate decision for us to want to boost the ABV just a little bit higher, up to that 48, because we figure that these toasted and charred wine casks can really carry a little bit more and give a bit more body and feel to it at a higher ABV. So this is our American Oak Shiraz. In some ways, it's the most accessible and approachable of these three whiskies that we're going to try in the Cellar Reserve Series. It's familiar. There's those bourbon-esque kind of notes with the American Oak and the vanilla and the cream, the strawberries, Shiraz. We're all pretty familiar with Shiraz there as well. So caramels, but this is a strawberries and cream, really fun whiskey that is our most popular actually that we've released so far. Doesn't mean it's our best, but it's the most popular. Cheers.
Yeah, when we had these three first come across, when we first started putting your products on the shelves here at the Whisky Company, we tried it, and this was definitely my instant familiar is a word that I've liked that you've used. There's something known about it, and like someone has just written, and this is exactly what I thought. There's an element of like I was thinking more like almost like that Barney banana flavored banana lollies. There's a sweetness and a creamy strawberry thing going on, and I've always enjoyed this one when we had those initial samples, and as soon as I've just started nosing this again, flooded straight back. And I can see a lot of people out there writing strawberry cheesecake, apple strudel, but there's a familiarity, there's a known element to this that I think is approachable to everyone. So it's a great general whiskey for that.
Yeah, great. When we conceived of what we wanted the Spirit Thief whiskies to be for the future and going into a core range, a sessionable style that was in a different flavor profile to the ports and sherries. And don't get me wrong, I love the ports and sherries and what Tasmanian whiskey has kind of been built on for the last 10 years. But we really wanted to see, can we play somewhere in just a different part of that flavor wheel spectrum that is focusing, I guess, on a little bit more of an elegant integration between, the fruit flavors, the toasting, the charring, the integration, the spirit not being too hidden in there as well, but a cleanliness that you can, go on and have as a sessionable style whiskey. So that was kind of the aims of what we're trying to do with this Cellar Reserve series. We will have some cask strength stuff coming out later on, but to start here is kind of our base approach. Yeah.
Brett, it's Kristen. There was a question before about where our grain comes from.
The grain is all Tasmanian barley. So up in the northwest here of Tasmania, there's a maltsters, Joe White maltsters, and pretty much most of the distilleries here in Tasmania source their grain from Joe White. And there are some other, beautiful grains being created on the mainland, but then we wouldn't be able to claim necessarily to be making Tasmanian barley. Interestingly, though, by definition, you don't have to have sourced your barley from Tasmania to be called a Tasmanian single malt, but nearly everyone does. Joe White malting's northwest.
Fantastic. I think it's it's better to have for that claim and for whatnot more of a sense of authenticity, having locally grown Tasmanian barley as opposed to just producing in Tasmania from mainland barley. I think that's a very good thing.
Yeah. No, it's good. Few people here, Damien Mackey, who I mentioned earlier, is the Mackey whiskey. He's working on some new whiskies now using rye and unmalted rye. And once you move away from barley, you've got a few more options as to where you can source from. But to remain a true single malt in that sense, we got to use Tasmanian barley, from a purist's point of view. So we've opted to stick that to that and kind of build flavor profiles with the yeast strains through fermentation in a direction here as well. Cool. All right. So what do we, any other thoughts or comments before we move on to our French oak?
Aaron's just saying he never thought he would use the word whiskey and banana in the same sentence, but I think it's on. Does anyone pick up any maple syrup? And I think,
yeah, I get some maple syrup on this for sure.
Definitely.
That vanilla and pancakes and maple syrup. Yeah, this is a nice approachable whiskey that isn't the most complex of whiskies that you're going to try in our portfolio or in general, but it is one that you can just really enjoy and sit back and is like an old friend that comes back around.
Yeah, we were just saying that maple syrup characteristic on the finish, especially, that lingering flavor as it sort of dissipates, is that maple hits through there. So that was a great call from sorry, I've lost it in the chat, but whoever said maple syrup, well done.
Awesome.
All righty, so shall we move on to the French oak?
Yeah, let's jump into the French oak. So, all right, the nice thing with this is that we get to look at now, the same ABV. So it's 48.3% ABV. It's from the same winery, Main & Cherry, but now we're looking at French oak rather than American. We're of course looking at Tempranillo rather than Shiraz. So these two whiskies are the first ones that we set out as pilot casks. We wanted to return to doing that when we came to our core releases here as well. So the French oak here is definitely going to carry a lot more spice. You're not going to get the, I guess, the tasting notes that you might be familiar with bourbons and single malts more broadly. But this is a really fun, exciting direction for us. We're going to do a lot more with French oak because now that we've done quite a bit of experimentation on toasting and charring where we've landed, we realized that we can do heavy toasts and chars with the French. because it's going to bring more spice and complex aromas in the same way that a winemaker uses French oak. We tried to learn a lot from the wine industry to carry that through into what we want to do with single malt. Whereas American oak, if you toast it too much, you end up just with very rich vanilla flavors. So we're going to back away from that and just do medium toast and chars with our American oak wood going forward. But with the French oak, we can find some spice and complexity that is really hopefully carrying through in the final whiskey here as well. So for me, this is a lot more floral style of whiskey. There's an elegance here, aromas. There's citrus, orange and lime. We tend to talk about, and it's almost like a springtime whiskey. When we sort of think about it, we sometimes apply seasons to it, and to me, this is an opening of those kind of blossoms and things like that. So orange blossom and things, which is nice on the nose, and then on the palate, it really takes you on a bit of a journey. So I'll be interested to see out of these two which ones everyone kind of prefers. And I'll give you some insights into what we've kind of found from our results there as well. Cool. Any thoughts on this?
Sorry, I was on mute then. I didn't realise.
That's all right.
So there's a couple of people who are saying things like buttercream on the nose, soft at the front, and then bam on the back. Orange blossom, citrus. Definitely get that citrus. Sort of that really light, fruity note. And Terence has just said a lovely fruity flavor and a low, gentle odor. But it's there's something else that I'm trying to think of what it reminds me of. I can't.
Fruity, not to like.
Yeah, definitely fruity, but there's something.
So I'll tell you a little on the notes that we kind of included on the back of the label, and that again comes through from our tasting panel. But we get a little bit of this white jasmine. I think that's the blossom that we sort of talk about. Sandalwood, 5 spice, and even a little bit of ginger that's going on there, and cherry blossoms in the springtime. So that's how we kind of express this particular whiskey. But French oak is really exciting. We love what we can do with toasting and charring on French oak, and this is kind of just the beginning for us. Passion fruit, yeah. It's Kristen. Yeah, passion fruit is definitely one that emerges from time to time.
Maybe even a little, I don't know, aniseed or fennel or something like that. You said ginger, yeah. But no, it's compared with the American oak Shiraz that you said, there's a lot more complexity to this one. There's more things to find as you go back for another sip. You getting another level with it, and it's got a pleasant, like it's the mouth feel, and the finish is quite almost a little spicy. Like you put the glass down and then you can still get it another 30 seconds later. I'm still getting sort of, there's still.
It definitely resonates, this one, doesn't it?
Yeah. I'm still struggling to figure out what I'm trying to identify, and I'm going to stop talking about it out loud, but I'll come back to you if I think about it.
No, it's good. I mean, this is really where we wanted to sort of take at least the Spirit Thieves approach to single malt, and sort of, try to play in this other part of the flavor spectrum that's maybe not as common or as investigated at this point. And the fact that it is hard to place our finger on what these tasting notes are is, I take it as a good thing. But let's run a little. I don't know how to do a survey, but right, let's just do it in the chat. So if you like the American oak better, just put an A, and if you like the French oak better, put an F, and let's just see how this plays out for the next minute and a half. Highland malt with a twist. Yeah. Cool.
Just race to the front.
Right?
Yeah. It started off even. Oh, a couple of late A's in there, mate.
Yeah, it's come back to the American.
Well, how much is an A plus worth? Is that worth two?
Yeah. Where am I on? I think I'm on. My wife likes I like the first one. My wife likes the second one.
Okay, that's good to know.
One of each. I'll count them up.
I don't know how to put an F.
I would say as they were flying through, I would have said that there might have been just favouring the Fs. We can go back. We'll go back and tally it up. But it's good to see that it's a good mix. You know, that's what you want to see. You know, and everyone's got their own preferences and tastes and stuff. I think the good thing is that I think we all have enjoyed both, and it's just a matter of preference. But I may have voted 3 times.
Right.
Well, that's just stacking the odds, isn't it?
Did you vote 3 times? That's the question.
It's all good.
Cool. All right. So the point I was going to make on that is that we had Tasmanian Whiskey Week here, maybe middle of August. I think it was, so a few months back, and really this was a chance for us to be able to get these whiskies out to, I think we had 300 people over the space of 6 hours, a lot of whom had never come across Spirit Thief before. And so out of those, interactions with people, American Oak Shiraz certainly was kind of the crowd favorite. That is showing to be the case with bottle sales for us. A little bit, not overwhelmingly, but then with the French Oak Tempranillo, we found that the industry and the bartenders and people that are very familiar with single malt whiskey are really loving what's happening with the French Oak. So it is more complex. It's not as, as familiar, but the bartenders have jumped all over it. And what we did with Sheen, with our French Oak Grenache as a double distillation, was the first of those exploration series to sell out. And it was mainly through all of the trade in the bartenders there. All right, cool. So that probably brings us up to our last whiskey of the night. And, just to make things a little bit more fascinating and interesting for you, this was an R&D project for us, which is an American Oak Tempranillo. So it's a mix between the last two of what we just had, but it's taking the American oak, of course, but we're looking at the flavor of the Tempranillo. So when you try these side by side, if you try it next to the French Oak Tempranillo, and if you've got some in your glass, the one we just had, you can see exactly what wood does to a whiskey. Toasted and charred in exactly the same way from the same winery, same batch of spirit for exactly the same amount of time in the bond store. Okay, so it was an R&D for us to see that. And then if you compare it to the third whiskey of the night, the American Oak Shiraz versus American Oak Tempranillo, you can see exactly what's going on just with the varietal themselves in the oak. And that for me was, really what we wanted to try to understand it a bit over the last 5 to 6 years, so we could be confident going forward, even when we're toasting and charring and working with wine casks. What are these flavor profile differences? Now, it is slightly higher ABV, so it's at 52.3%, which is, of course, going to carry a little bit more flavor on it. This is a limited edition in the sense that we didn't lay down any more. It's an R&D experiment across, I think, maybe 12 casks to sort of see how does this shape up. So I'll be interested to see, what you guys all think of this one. But it's certainly a fun whiskey. I've got a very specific tasting note on it, but I'll give you guys a little bit of chance here to nose it and see for yourself. So slightly higher, 52%, but American Oak Tempranillo. Can everyone get a sense that this is a richer, higher ABV? The viscosity is there, the mouthfeel, even on 4%, 4-5% makes a big difference.
It's very noticeable.
When we're doing tasting panels, we look at what the ABV is that these whiskies reflect best as. I'm going to stop sharing just so I can see comments.
Oh, I was just.
Photography's
The
fantastic.
photography is fantastic.
What about the whiskey? The photography is good. Maybe
It's like a.
Okay, nice.
So what's that? Berry sultanas and chocolate and biscuits. Maybe even bitumen, but genuinely incredible. Great comment.
Yeah, that's nice. I've really come around. This is probably my favorite child of the three. Maybe because I never have to worry about doing it again, and know that it's limited. But it's a lot of fun. The thing that both Rod, our production manager, and myself came up with, almost in sync when we were trying to work this out, is that it's almost like an old-fashioned cocktail as a single malt whiskey. So you get those maraschino cherries, you get the orange peel coming through, you get the demerara sugars kind of thing. There's almost rum elements going on, but it's rich in fruit there as well. So
I think Jenna has hit the nail on the head of what I was thinking. It's the salt. There's a salted caramel.
Yeah.
There's a creamy caramel thing. There's a saltiness.
It's a dessert.
Great pour.
Dessert whiskey. And if you've got some,
Aren't they all?
whiskey number 3, American Oak Shiraz, it's one of my favorite experiments to do with people that are trying these 3. Go back and see what does variety do to maturation. Because for a long time, whiskey industry's kind of treated red wine casks just as ex-red wine casks. They've kind of been finishing ex-red wine. It doesn't matter if you toast or char. They can be wet, they can be dry. And it hasn't necessarily always received the best reception. So I think what we're trying to do is work with this to see, what's possible. Working with great wineries where we know the provenance as well. So as we go forward, we're getting to do some things in South Australia and Tasmania. Domain A, as I mentioned, is a great winery here, which we picked up some Cabernet casks from earlier on. Molly Duca in South Australia creates huge, big red wines down in McLaren Vale. And so we've got some Molly Duca wines, and Clarendon Hills for Grenache will be out in about March next year there as well. So yeah, there's some exciting things coming on down the line.
There's a couple of interesting ones. You mentioned rum and raisin. And Anthony jumped straight on and said, now that you've mentioned it, yes, absolutely rum. And there's definitely that rum spirit characteristic to it. But David makes that interesting one, butter menthol on the tail. And I definitely, as soon as I've read that, I can taste that straight away, that mentholic note to it. And someone else has just written, really enjoy the balance of the
I think of the wine and the whiskey.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, I hadn't seen the secondary comment of the wine and the whiskey. So yeah, no, it's great comments, guys. Yeah, it's lovely. It's genuinely lovely, and it's almost a shame that you don't have to make this one again. But,
I know. But there's even more exciting things in the pipeline along the way.
That's good to know.
I think we did a reasonable amount. There was 750 bottles of this, so there's still a little bit left. But yeah, we were really surprised when this came through as R&D, and we're like, well, we have to bottle this as it is and make it into a great set as that goes. So yeah, we got to do some fun things with this particular whiskey. as we talked about earlier on, you guys have got all 5 of these whiskies available tonight.
That is absolutely accurate. We do. We have all 5 of these whiskies available tonight, and ongoing where possible with the Spirit Thief products here at the Whisky Company. And for those of you participating tonight, we do have a code that you'll all get sent in an email, but you can write it down now. It is Spirit Thief 10, SPIRITTHIEF10, and that will get you 10% off any and all Spirit Thief bottlings that you wish to purchase for the next 48 hours. So that's for you guys. There's some great whiskies in front of us that we've tried tonight, and I've just gone back, as was Brett's recommendation, between the 2 American oaks, and it's changed my perception of the American oak Shiraz now. Just the difference between them. So I've thoroughly enjoyed them all, as I'm hoping you guys have out there. But so yeah, if you have enjoyed a particular one, let us know in the chat which one's been your favorite. I know there was a lot of love early for both the New Zealand and the Benrinnes. Has one of these other American oak or French oak whiskies taken your preference? And if you are really enjoying it and want to grab a bottle, Craig's been posting the links to the bottles throughout the night. If not, just search for Spirit Thief at thewhiskycompany.com.au, and we will definitely help you out. And don't forget that code Spirit Thief 10. But I think it's been a really informative presentation, Brett, and thank you for that, including the little tour and the all the slides and stuff behind it. Was there anything more that you guys or Kristen or anything wanted to say before we maybe hand over to some questions?
No, guys, just, you know, it's been really, this is the first time we've been able to do one of these webinars with the Benrinnes. So it's been great. That, as I mentioned, was the jewel in the crown of that exploration series. So to go from our 5-year-old New Zealand to our 11-year-old Benrinnes Bordeaux into now what we're trying to do ourselves here in Tasmania. And, you know, these have been in 25-litre casks. So I hope, you know, for some people it changes the perception a little bit about small cask aging. They're not always over oaked. You can still find some balance. You know, for us going forward, we've been laying down 120-litre casks for the last 2 years. So what you're tasting, we laid for the 6 months, then we'll move into 50 litres and then 120. So that's what we've been laying down. So our future whiskies will be at least 5-6 years of age. So these are around the 2.5 to 3 years mark. But, you know, as a young distillery, we're really excited about where we can kind of get to with this direction. So I hope it's been an enjoyable insight into, you know, toasting and charring with varietal specific red wines. And I'm totally open to questions. Bring them at me and we'll answer them with all sincerity.
Yeah, I was just about to say, we can now open up to any questions if someone wants to, and please, if we can respect them one at a time, if you wanted to come on and ask a question about something. But just before we start, Kristen's been good enough to go back and tell you the results, and it's an even 14-14, 50-50 split. However, we may have had a couple of double voters and a triple voter, but you know, the numbers don't lie. It's a fairly even mix. And just looking after that at the people saying which one's been their favourite, I'm seeing nearly every single bottle that we've tried being mentioned in that grouping. So that's testimony to a great spread, a great selection of whiskies, and you know, I think it's ticking boxes for everyone out there. So thank you again, Brett, for such an informative presentation. And is anyone out there like to come on and ask a question, or let us know what you're thinking in more specific terms? Feel free to just unmute and say hello.
Question from Jenna now. Yeah.
Sorry, we've got a question from Jenna.
Jenna's question. So Jenna asks, I'd love to know what you hope to get out of the aging process. Are you looking for something specific, notes or flavors? So Jenna, the answer really is, I hope that Spirit Thief can create a truly integrated, complex flavor profile between the fruit that's certainly there from the wine casks, the toasting and the charring process, and the oak itself, because that's what winemakers kind of look for when they're creating elegant, mature, sophisticated kind of wines. And I love a cask strength port. Don't get me wrong. We, as I mentioned, got Heartwood up the road, and they're big, punchy, in your face whiskies, just like I grew up with those big, punchy Shiraz. But as I've gone on, I'm kind of finding that my palate, and certainly where Rod and I sit, is we're really looking for balance. And that's what Scotland has developed over, hundreds of years there, where the spirit can shine through. It's not overwhelmed by fruit, or it's not overwhelmed by oak. And so aging in those larger casks should hopefully allow that integration to come on in a more balanced way over time. Plus, you got to go through those processes to be in market. With a 3-year-old whiskey, you got to use smaller casks, and then we'll grow from there. So we do have some 200s down as well, which will be 8 to 10 years away. But if we did that, then none of us would have whiskey for 8 years. So it's the curse of being a small batch distillery. You've got to start small and grow from there.
That leads through to another good question there, Brett. Could you please say something about how whiskies change with age?
Yeah, it really depends on what type of whiskies we're talking about. So most Scottish whiskey and Scotch, you'll be looking at least 10 to 12 years of age, and a lot of the times that's to do with I guess the spirit to wood ratio of the size of the barrel. But you know, without getting too much into the technical chemistry side of things, you've got congeners and esters, so you have a reductive process as well as an additional process. When you're using small casks, you're tending to be looking at all the things that are additive to the spirit. But over time, as things age and you get evaporation taking place, you get reductive notes that can bring on some more interesting flavor profiles like that umami and saltiness, and possibly even length of whiskey there as well. So for aging longer whiskies, you can actually cut your spirit slightly lower, like we saw in the Benrinnes, and it gives some mouthfeel and body and complexity. When you're aging younger, you've kind of got to have a cleaner spirit kind of cut. And also, we're not hiding behind, I say hiding behind, we don't have port or sherry that's really rich up front in that flavor profile if the spirit, you know, goes into the faints too much. So I'm very conscious that as we grow and go into larger barrels, our spirit cuts may start to change, and we'll get some more richness and mouthfeel in those whiskies in 5 years' time. Because literally the spirit that we're making today, we won't see as a whiskey in bottle for 6 years at the moment in the way we're going with it. So yeah. Craig, New Zealand is now deep fried cherry ripe bars.
Yeah, we just went back to the New Zealand, and it's
amazing.
After tasting all the rest of them, going back, letting it sit, it's fantastic. It's even better than it was before.
Yeah. And it's a really viscous, rich whiskey that can take a couple of drops of water, even at 48% on that as well. Any thoughts about mixing cask finishes, double casks? I'll answer that before I get on to Peter. Yes, David. We're sort of talking about it here as our field blend. So in wine language, which we tend to use a bit because Rod and I come from a wine background. So it's easy for us to kind of talk about that vocabulary. And in wine world, if you mix a red and a white, varieties of grapes, you can sort of talk about them as field blends. So we might do that as a vintage field blend once a year, take the best casks that are happening in the bond store across different varieties. And at this stage, we don't have any white wine casks, but we might lay some down for field blends, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, etc., and do something really cool around that. But our first instance, and what I wanted to showcase with this distillery, and this is the varietal itself. I wanted to be able to say, this is what a Tempranillo maturation tastes like. This is what a Shiraz looks like. This is what a Grenache. There is a difference. There's flavor profiles that can be replicated. Now let's bring them together once we understand them in a bit more detail. So at this point, we're not looking at marrying apart from with some bourbon. So we did lay down some bourbon almost as an insurance policy. If we got too dry or too tannic, one of the criticisms of wine casks can be that there's too much tannin that comes through, and almost that bitterness. So we laid down some bourbon to be able to balance that out. And actually, our next release just before Christmas is going to be American oak Cabernet together with American oak bourbon. We just signed off on it on the tasting panel last night. So it'll be 70% American oak Cabernet with 30% American oak bourbon.
Looking forward to trying that one in the future.
Excited about that. Yeah.
Sounds great.
Cool. Pete, we did our one peated release. If you come and visit us at the Bond store, we've actually kept those casks that we did the peated, and it was very heavily peated, right? So any spirit that we put into there, we call our infinity cask. So when we take samples and we're no longer using those samples, we'll pour them into these ex-peated casks. So the only way to try Spirit Thief peated is come and visit us at the Bond store, and we'll give you tastings using the Spirit Thief. You can draw your own sample out, and there will be a peated influence in it. But in terms of making peated spirit on site here, no, we can't really do it in this distillery because that peat influence will resonate and I guess be detectable in the other products, which we don't want to be able to do.
I'm going to take you up on that offer and come down and try it because I'm a big peated whiskey fan and I'm keen to try it just because of the remarks you've made tonight, if nothing else.
Yeah.
Couple of questions. So we've had someone ask why Tempranillo casks, but as an extension to that, are there any other casks not usually associated or that may never have been used in the maturation or finishing of whiskey that you're keen on trying, or that you've got in the back of your mind that I'd love to try this cask one day? Or
Yeah. All right. So going back to 2015, when we were making the initial decisions around it, my connections and background was South Australia and Adelaide. So Tempranillo is traditionally a Spanish grape varietal, which is really popular in that sense. It's on the lighter side of things. So, if you talk about Shiraz and Merlot being at the heavier end of the scale, Pinot Noir, which is cool climate wine conditions here in Tasmania, we grow a lot of Pinot. Tempranillo sort of sits in the middle there. And so we wanted something to, I guess, be at the opposite end of not the opposite end, but something that was distinguished different to Shiraz. The fact that French oak and Tempranillo just work so well together. And we're actually going to source some Hungarian oak Tempranillo next year.
Hungarian oak.
You in on that? We've got a winemaker who makes a beautiful Hungarian oak Tempranillo, which just brings some complexity there. We'll buy those casks, but that whiskey won't be here till 2027, most likely, by the time it comes on. So we get to do some cool stuff. So Tempranillo was there. Also, there wasn't very many people in the world really, when it comes to the whiskey side of things, working with Temp. So we figured we'd jump in and do that. And then years later, I met Miles here a couple of years ago from Westwood Distillery in Portland, Oregon. I'm sure there's some people here tonight that have had Westwood's whiskies. The Whiskey Club's done a bunch of them. And anyway, Miles and I got chatting one night after a session here in Hobart. And, I'd sort of given him a chance to try what we'd done with French oak Temp. And he was doing some Tempranillo single cask kind of stuff there in Portland as well from wineries in the region. So that was kind of cool. And I think maybe there's been an independent bottling of a Brook Laddie that used a Tempranillo along the way, but that's about it. So it's about what we've got access to. One that we've thrown around, which we haven't yet sourced, is a Durif. If anyone's familiar with red wine Durif, it's right on the cusp of being a fortified, wine without actually being fortified. So you normally get it about 14-15%. It's a really, really rich red that's deeper than Shiraz. So maybe if Durif, becomes an option, we might just do that for the sake of it.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then we've had a lot of success with Grenache. So Grenache comes on again for us in a sort of March, April next year.
Can I ask, sorry, Craig, can I ask, how do you introduce the peat? Like, where do you get the peat in Australia in the water?
Yeah, so the one peated whiskey that we did do there was from the northwest coast of Tasmania. So Lark uses a peat from the middle of Tassie, which is kind of soft and almost spearmint-like. This one was like a steam train kind of peat. So Peter Bignell, who runs the Belgrove distillery, most famous for making rye whiskies rather than single malt, his brother actually has a peat farm or a peat bog on his farm up on the northwest coast. And so when we did a Belgrove exploration collaboration, that's where we got the peat from, and used it in his distillery itself. So we smoked it after we gristed the grain as well. So we got the grain, gristed it all up through the grist mill, put it in a big tub, and then put the pipe for the smoke into the bottom of that tub, and it smoked all the grain for about 8 hours. I think the ppm on it, we got it measured over in Sweden, and the measure was something like 44 parts per million. So it was quite up there. You know, Ardbeg and Lefroy measure after before the grain. We got it measured on the whiskey itself. So we couldn't exactly compare because we did it on the whiskey, they do it on the grain. So we're not exactly sure, you know, how that fits in.
Thank you.
A good question. Thank you for asking that, Alexander. Has anyone else got any other questions? Craig, is there anything that you'd like to add before we start to get around to wrapping it up?
Nothing at the moment. A lot of the barrels that you're using are sort of red wine. Is there? Are you thinking about like Chardonnay or anything like that locally?
Yeah, this does come up a bit for us for Chardonnay. So Sullivan's Cove did a Chardonnay many years ago that came out maybe 2017, 2018. They only had one cask, and it was like 15 to 16 years of age. But again, it was a wet fill. It was thrown in. It was an interesting whiskey. It didn't have a necessarily great result compared to what they do really well with, you know, their core range on ports and bourbons. So there's so much to be explored with red wine cask flavor profiles that we're not really ready yet to dip our toes into white wine. But what has made me think about doing it more is that field blend. It's like, okay, well, if we can do something exciting with the field blend and pick and choose like a spice rack from the Bond store, it would be good to have some white wine to be able to do it. But I'm not confident that a white wine cask by itself will, you know, contribute great results. And we haven't done any pilot tests on it, to be honest. But, you know, in a few years' time, maybe we'll move on to that white wine there as well. Brilliant. Check out the Pfeiffer team from Rutherglen. They also do a great Durif. Yeah. Rutherglen is the place to go to get that. Thank you.
The only other thing I had to ask was, so you've obviously built up relationships with lots of different distilleries. Yeah. How did you build those relationships? What were their thoughts at the start?
Cool.
Get in there, Craig.
Who am I talking to? Who asked the question, Craig?
I was making my way over.
Oh, right. Okay. No, good question. So, guys, as I sort of mentioned, I grew up in the wine industry, spent a bit of time in London, the UK, and came back and sort of moved to Tassie 10 years ago. My move to Tasmania was actually to start a small bar that had a focus on wine and spirits whiskey. So I guess I'd been visiting Tasmania for a few years on and off and had seen the amazing things that Lark and Sullivan's Cove and Hellier's Road were doing with whiskey. And I thought, wow, maybe there's something that's going to happen here with whiskey down the line. I just didn't know whether it was going to be a couple of years away or 5 or 10. And so the plan was actually to start a small bar. And I figured that to start a small bar, I better go and meet these distillers and see what it is that they're doing. I'll just jump on a tour like we did wine tours back in South Australia growing up. But I pretty quickly found out that there was no way to get around. Most of them weren't necessarily open to the public. There was only half a dozen at the time. And they were really sort of, history only kind of scenarios. So after looking at running in this bar situation, Tasmania was very cold during winter. We didn't have dark mofo at that stage back then. So the bar, numbers didn't necessarily stack up. But when I went and visited these distilleries, it sort of emerged with Redlands opening up that, maybe there was an opportunity here to run a tour company to distilleries. And that's actually how I pivoted and started out here in Tassie and got involved in the industry. So I started Tasmanian Whiskey Tours in 2013. And 6 weeks later, Sullivan's Cove won the world's best single malt whiskey. So it was very fortunate timings.
Good timing all around.
After that, I think we had The Age and all the major newspapers when they come to Tasmania and come visit these places. And, even then, Sullivan's Cove was far more famous, internationally than what it was here in Australia. But that era, that period of the next sort of 12, 24 months kind of changed things and really kickstarted the next phase of sort of small craft distilling, not only in Tassie, but, across the nation there as well. So now we've got about 60 distilleries here in Tasmania that are registered with the Tasmanian Whisky Spirits Producers Association. I ran that company, Tasmanian Whisky Tours, which became Drink Tasmania for 6 years. And during that time, I was visiting, these 3-4 distilleries in the first year that grew to, about 12, 15 on our run just here in the south every week, a couple of times a week. And that's how I started to see the relationships and get engaged with these guys, because I was out there taking visitors from all over the world every week, seeing what was working for some distilleries like Belgrove and Sheen, even Adams, but Lark and Sullivan's Cove, William McHenry, down south. I would be there literally every week and seeing what those guys were doing and learn a lot over that time. And in 2015, we were just excited about using the wine cask, and it made sense to do something that I had access to, that I understood, rather than make another, sherry and bourbon sort of style Tasmanian whiskey. So that was really my introduction to the industry and how it came on. All right, what have we got there from Kolschi? He's got the Drink Tasmania business card. Good man. Did you come on tour with me? You did. All right. Hey, listen. Just because I've still got hosting capacity, I can ask him to unmute.
Howdy.
Hey, mate. What year did we go on tour?
I was just looking at the photos. That was 2018 in June.
Okay, cool. Did I take the tour back then?
I honestly can't remember. That was
Okay.
9 o'clock in the morning whiskey.
Memorable.
We went to Old Kempton. We went to, I'm just trying to look at all the things. A mate of mine, he bought a barrel from Sullivan's Cove, a 20-litre barrel.
Yeah.
And so we went to Sullivan's Cove and tried their French and their American oak, and then we tried his barrel, which was fantastic. So we went to Old Kempton. It was an absolutely ripping day. It's funny, I've been thinking a mate of mine, Dalen, who's on this as well, and I'm saying, mate, you've got to get to Tasmania. You've got to do the tour. It is just the bee's knees. It's an amazing place, and the whiskey was just next level. It was an incredible learning experience.
Yeah, awesome. Oh, that's really good to hear. I did end up selling that company so I could concentrate on this full time. So after we'd had success with those pilot casks, it was really a decision between the two. So Drink Tasmania is going from strength to strength down here. A couple of guys that are born here in Tasmania took it on. Peter runs it now. They also run the Richmond Tasting House. So if you do come to Tasmania, look them up and go and visit the distilleries. It's fantastic, and come and see us here in Patriarch Drive. It'd be great to.
Well worth it. It was amazing. It was an amazing week.
Great recommendation. Thanks for jumping on as well, Kochi.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for answering that question. Because a few people have said tonight around 500ml bottles, and I think what we have to understand is the industry in Tasmania is just at the start. It's not even touched on what all our industries have needed to do. I mean, we bring in Taiwanese whiskey, and they're the same. It's quite, they're doing 700ml bottles, but they're expensive, and it's really hard to hit your market at 700ml bottles and an expensive price mark. Where I think in Tassie, they're hitting 500ml, and they're trying to put it at a point where you can taste the whiskey, you can enjoy it. And the more you enjoy it, the more they make, and the more they make, the cheaper it gets. And we just got to support that. It's something that you just got to get behind. So it's just it's an exciting moment for whiskey in Australia, and it's an exciting moment just for business in Australia. Like we're starting out from scratch, and they just need support. So it's good, Yeah, and lots of hard work. Obviously tonight we can see that everybody's putting in so much hard work to it, and even us coming on these things and playing a part in it all. We're playing a part in the industry.
Yeah, we've all got to support from the ground up, and especially Australian distilleries and Tassie distilleries and comparatively fairly new distilleries. It's all part of the chain, and the more we all support internally, the bigger and easier it gets for everybody concerned. Out of curiosity on that, how many people who are still with us? Still 30 people here. So how many people here were familiar with Spirit Thief coming into tonight? And how many, what might be easy to ask, how many people weren't? How many people were introduced to it as a part of this tasting? Is there anyone out? Yeah, I can't see everybody because I've got the screen on, but there looks to be, I would say, just by a show of hands there, about 50-50 from the screen I'm looking at. So for those people, who have been aware, and especially for the people who have been introduced to it, I hope that you all now have a much better, like I do, a much better understanding of the company, the distillery, and of course the products that we see in front of us and have tasted tonight. And I'm sure you all enjoyed them just as much as we did sitting here. I just wish that we were starting from the top again.
Can I ask a question, Craig? I did a distillery tour of Tasmania a few years ago, and you guys weren't included in it. Sorry, Spirit Thief weren't included in it. But are you included in any of the whiskey tours that are currently on the market? I know with COVID that's been a bit awkward, but is there a company that's running tours around a few of the distilleries that we could maybe book into or whatever and come and see you guys?
Yeah, so number one, I'd say Drink Tasmania, have a chat to those guys. We're open Monday to Friday. So to answer that question, Alexander, we have only had product kind of available since June, really, beyond the exploration series sort of stuff. Yeah. So it is our intention to be open to the public every Friday morning when we get into 2022, because at the moment we don't have enough tourists here to sort of warrant doing that. But we're bottling and distilling and doing all the labeling and all that sort of stuff every Friday, guaranteed. And then we'll work with, the way when I used to run it is not every distillery is open every day. You have different routes to be able to cover them along the way. So we'll certainly be available through Drink Tasmania going forward. But if you are coming down, then, at Patriarch Drive, you can come and visit Heartwood TIB, Tim up the road. You've got Overeem next door. You've got us and white labeling here. You can walk around and see Spirit. We'll take you into the bond stores, crack open some casks of some new things that we've got maturing, because we love to have that feedback. And, having run a tour company for 6 years, I certainly, picked up a few tips. I think that as a tourist, the things that I'd like to see that I want to integrate in to our company here as well. So, that's probably a roundabout way of saying, yes, we will be available by appointment to anyone that wants to look us up. So just jump on the Spirit Thief website, contact us. It'll go through to Kristen, and then we'll make sure that we're available for people that want to come and visit us direct. Otherwise, Drink Tasmania will always give you a great experience of 3 or 4 Tasmanian distilleries in the space of a day. If you go on a weekend, we're not open on the weekends. I've got kids and a family, that kind of thing. So any day of the week, though, Drink Tasmania will be able to make it work for you.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, we've kind of crossed over the 8:30 mark now. So
We have.
back to you, Anton and Craig. And I'd love to say thank you very much for hosting me tonight here from Tasmania. As you guys mentioned, there's a lot of people pouring in a lot of hard work and effort from all over the country. So thank you to you guys, what you're doing with the Whisky Company, putting on these tastings and introducing, small brands like us to established audiences around the nation is really helpful. So thank you all.
Thank you for that. We appreciate that. And thank you for participating and for helping us put this together. As I think it was Bill said before, that's the beauty of doing tasting events like this. You get to learn, experience, and understand about new distilleries, new products, and it's all education. That's what we're all here for, to try and to learn. So thank you guys for your time and for putting in the effort to help put this together. Thank you to all of you who are still here and hanging around, and that was a very great session. I think we had 41 at peak, all sitting in not missing a word, and there's still 30 people here now. So on behalf of us, Craig and myself here at the Whisky Company, thank you again to Brett, to Kristen, and to all of you for joining us tonight. And for those who have participated with questions and feedback, thank you. It helps make the night a much more engaging thing for all of us when we all share how we're feeling and what we're tasting and what we're finding. So look, second.
Enjoy your freedoms tomorrow.
Yes, and for those of you in our local area in Melbourne, enjoy your freedoms from midnight tomorrow. enjoy getting out of lockdown, double salute. I'm with you there, Terry. So so have a great weekend. For all of those of you who have already got that, enjoy it as well. And we hope to see you guys at another tasting event in the future. When and if you get down to Tassie, like Brett said, get online, get onto Kristen, book a time, go visit, go see the other distilleries down there. There's plenty to choose from, and support the local industry, like we said before. And we hope that you've had a lovely night. Thank you very much to everybody.
Thanks, Anton.
No worries at all. And with that, we'll stop the recording. If any of you, for whatever reason, would like to, all the recordings of these events end up going on our YouTube channel. So if you want to go back and see any part of it for whatever reason, that's always there. And yeah, in the meantime, if you've got any of them left, go back and try some of those earlier whiskies again. See how they've changed with a bit of time, opened up a bit like that. And yeah, if anyone now has anything just informal, just chit chat, we're here for a little bit.
I was just going to quickly ask, because we've just got our orders wrong, but we are just on the website now ordering.
Yeah.
The last one was what was the last one?
The American Oak
last one
Temp.
was the American Oak Tempranillo.
Tempranillo.
Beautiful, thank you.
No worries. And thank you for your contribution.